Narco-Submarines, drug shampoo, and cocaine casts. Over the years, criminals have come up with ingenious ways to smuggle their product. Let's take a look at the top 15 most intelligent smugglers in the world. Number 15. Meth veggies. In 2016, 2 trucks attempted to transport a large number of cucumbers and jalapenos into the United States across the Texas-Mexico border. Harmless, right? As it turns out, hidden inside the truckloads of vegetables was about $5 million worth of methamphetamine. The trucks were busted when they were inspected by a canine unit. The jalapeno and cucumber trucks containing meth actually occurred as 2 separate incidents, but they both happened at the same border crossing on the same day, so either the authorities were misled or the 2 vegetable-loving drug traffickers had the same genius idea on the same day. Number 14. Dining on drugs. Back in 2009, a 35-year-old man from Spain was caught for possessing a large amount of narcotics. Spanish police seized a 42-piece dining set complete with cups, bowls, plates, and everything else when they discovered the entire set of dishes was made out of compressed cocaine. The combined weight of the dining set amounted to a whopping 45 pounds of illegal drugs. Whoever created the dishes didn't take it easy either. They completed the unassuming dining set with blue paint and sunflower decorations. The attempt was apparently masterminded by drug lords in Venezuela, and it's shocking that the police caught on to it. Who would have suspected a dining set? Number 13. Snakes on crack. Shockingly, people have been using bodies of reptiles, fish, and other animals to transport drugs for quite some time. And unfortunately for the animals, it seems to work often enough that the drug cartels continue using this insane method. In not only a notorious 1993 incident, but also numerous other occasions, a smuggler tried to bring drugs illegally across the border by hiding them inside of live boa constrictors being transported by plane. The drugs were first packed into condoms that were then inserted into the snakes. The bodies of the reptiles were then sewn shut. Unfortunately, all of the snakes died due to their injuries, but they received justice when the smuggler was caught. Number 12. Hot tamales. In 2014, U.S. border officers at George Bush International Airport in Houston caught a smuggler attempting to bring about 7 ounces of cocaine into the country. But the middle-aged man from El Salvador didn't just try carrying the drugs in his pocket. While he might have had a greater chance of crossing the physical land border carrying drugs, U.S. airports are known for their extremely high level of security, which ramped up after 9/11. The man had to get smart, so he hid the cocaine inside tamales. Yes, the dish made out of ground meat and wrapped in corn husk. Unfortunately, he failed to declare his box of 200 tamales when he filled out his traveler's declaration, which caused him to have to undergo an additional security screening. That's when officers found the cocaine tamales. Officers seized the cocaine before turning the man over to Houston police. Still, the drug smuggler deserved props for his creativity. Number 11. Drug shampoo. You know drug smugglers are extremely desperate when they resort to changing the physical form of their drug in order to bring it to another country illegally. They may be desperate, but they're also highly creative smugglers. While a lot of drug trafficking attempt to illegally bring drugs across the borders by concealing them in food items, these guys decided to try a different necessity as a hiding spot. In 2016, Chilean officials confiscated almost 4 pounds of cocaine that had been turned into a cream state and hidden within bottles of shampoo. Officials stated that it was the first time they had found that drug in that form. While cocaine is most often found in powder form, they also found it as a liquid and hidden in gas tanks, bottles, and other unassuming containers. Still, turning cocaine into a shampoo-like cream is rather impressive. Number 10. Narco-Submarines. When parents send their smart kids off to college to become architects and engineers, they generally expect them to graduate and get a good job with some sort of construction or technology company. But if your engineer happens to be acquainted with members of a drug cartel, they may be up for a different kind of task. Drug traffickers in Central and South America have been caught using sophisticated electric submarines to transport narcotics into the United States. And they aren't stolen military equipment or commercially bought vessels. These are custom-built ships made by engineers contracted by the cartels, specifically for moving drugs illegally across the border. Because the vessels are submersible, they're harder to catch and detect than by other methods of drug trafficking. And even though many of them have been caught, there are many more out there. Still, it's quite impressive for cartels and their associates to have made fully functional submarines on their own. Number 9. Catapults. Drug traffickers have tried countless ways to hide things in their clothes or vehicles while attempting to smuggle them across the border. But one of the most effective ways to transport narcotics might not be bringing them across the border crossing. Instead, sending them over the border without actually needing to carry them through a checkpoint might be a better idea. Of course, cartels aren't really going to be able to fly planes over the border, considering the budget of the US military. But there's another way that smugglers have tried to send drugs through the air. In fact, some people have actually used catapults to launch packs of drugs across the border. Whoever came up with this idea really didn't want to try to bring the drugs through the border crossing. It just goes to show you that when drug smugglers decide they need to transport something illegally, they find the most creative ways to do so. We are constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Drug Jesus. If you thought some of the other ways of smuggling cocaine were interesting, this one really is something else. And it's a perfect example of drug smugglers using clever tactics to try to pass cocaine-filled containers as regular objects. Back in 2008, border officers busted an attempt to bring cocaine into the U.S. through the Mexican border at Laredo, Texas. After drug dogs alerted the officers, they found a 7-pound statue of Jesus in the back of a car. The statue checked positive for cocaine and turned out to be made from a mix of plaster and the illegal substance. But this wasn't just any statue. This was the statue of Jesus Christ, the primary figure of the Christian religion. Border Patrol then arrested the 61-year-old man who had allegedly offered the driver of the car $80 to bring the Jesus statue across the border. If you're a drug smuggler, it probably wasn't a clever idea, but somewhat surprising. Number 7. The Tunnel Architects. When thinking about intelligent criminals, tunnels aren't that wild of a concept. Numerous criminals, both in real life and in movies and television, have used tunnels in some form as a way to escape prison. But the Sinaloa cartel's tunnel network that was overseen by Joaquin Guzman before his arrest is quite vast. The border between Mexico and the US has been described by many to be like a block of Swiss cheese, filled with interconnecting tunnels that have mostly been constructed by Guzman's gang. Joaquin Guzman, better known as his nickname El Chapo, is no stranger to tunnels. He used a mile-long underground tunnel to escape from prison after one of his multiple arrests. Around the height of his reign, Guzman contracted an architect and ordered his men to build a small tunnel running between a lawyer's house and one of his drug warehouses. That was just the beginning. After the first tunnel was successful, the Sinaloa cartel went on to build a large network of large tunnels that included electricity, motorized carts, and ventilation. Through these tunnels, the cartel transported countless drugs between the US and Mexico. While El Chapo was the top dog of the cartel, whoever the architects of the tunnel network were, they did something unprecedented in the world of drug smuggling. Number 6. Something's fishy. After a drug smuggling attempt is used enough times, the authorities start catching on to patterns. Eventually, the Border Patrol learned new techniques and rendered them useless. That's why the cartels have to keep finding more and more creative ways to ship narcotics. In one of the strangest and most interesting drug smuggling attempts yet, a cartel tried to illegally ship cocaine across the borders while hiding the drug inside of the bodies of dead, frozen sharks. While we've seen other smugglers attempt to hide drugs in other foods such as vegetables and boxed meals, hiding them in shark carcasses seems a little extreme. It's honestly impressive that the authorities were able to find the narcotics. This shark tale happened in 2009 in Yucatan, but it wasn't actually the first time the authorities found cocaine packed into seafood. The Sinaloa cartel was run by the notorious drug lord El Chapo, made use of seafood to ship drugs before, in hopes that fish would be unlikely to seem suspicious. Unfortunately for the smugglers, the police were smart enough to inspect the cocaine-loaded fish this time. Still, the idea was pretty clever, and make no mistake about it, the smugglers will just find an even better method of smuggling. Number 5. The Cocaine Godmother. Griselda Blanco is definitely not your average drug smuggler, whatever that means. As one of the most terrifying drug lords of all time and one of the few female top dogs, Griselda sent fear into the hearts of many before her eventual downfall. She went by many names, including the Black Widow, the Cocaine Godmother, and the Queen of Narco-Trafficking. The names were all perfectly fitting, as the woman was one of the leaders and pioneers of the Miami drug trade. She operated between 1980s and early 2000s, but her seemingly natural attraction to crime began way before that. Griselda Blanco murdered somebody for the first time when she was only 11, reportedly shooting a neighbor's child. With the insane amount of money earned from her cocaine empire, Blanco loved ordering people around, smoking crack, and throwing orgy parties. She also delved into fashion entrepreneurship, developing a lingerie line that contained secret pockets made for hiding things. Experts have estimated that Blanco was responsible for the deaths of around 2,000 people during her reign. She also became the first woman to become a billionaire through criminal activity. She would pay the price, however, as she eventually went to prison. After her release, she was assassinated at the age of 69. Number 4. Cocaine cast. As drug laws and technology continue to improve, drug smuggling techniques used by traffickers get more and more sophisticated. In 2009, a man wearing a cast on his leg arrived at Barcelona airport from South America. Although his plan to smuggle the drugs would be clever in any other situation, considering that he actually had a broken leg, the Spanish police were immediately alarmed, as people had attempted to smuggle drugs in casts before. The 66-year-old man, whose name was not released, didn't just hide drugs inside his cast. The entire cast was made out of cocaine. Bet nobody's thought of that one before. Apparently, the Spanish police have a spray that turns blue when it goes on anything that has touched cocaine. They had to be surprised when they sprayed it and found out the cast itself was cocaine. On top of that, the man was caught with 6 cans of beer and 2 hollowed-out stools full of cocaine. We aren't really sure how he broke his leg, but it sounds like he must have been doing something questionable when he did it. After being caught, the man was taken to hospital for his actual broken leg, but was guarded by the police during his stay. Number 3. Frank Lucas. As one of the most notorious and tragically genius drug traffickers to come from the United States, Frank Lucas rose to such prominence that his life inspired a film directed by Ridley Scott. Operating out of Harlem, New York, Frank Lucas came up with the idea to cut out any middleman of his drug operation. He successfully established a drug trade between Southeast Asia and the United States by taking advantage of his associates in the military. Frank Lucas's heroin was sourced directly from poppies grown and processed in Vietnam. One of his most notorious acts was smuggling drugs into the U.S. by hiding them in coffins and deceased American soldiers whose bodies were being flown back from the Vietnam War. With his high-quality and directly sourced heroin, his attrition towards competitors in New York, and the exploitation of corruption in the NYPD, Frank Lucas was able to avoid arrest for years while earning millions. But after an investigation, Lucas was finally arrested and convicted in 1976. He was sentenced to 70 years in prison. Unwilling to spend the rest of his life behind bars, Lucas turned and became an informant for the police in exchange for having his sentence reduced to just 5 years. However, he was arrested and convicted again in 1984 for more drug crimes and sent to prison for 7 more years. He was released and died in 2019 at the age of 88, but only after a long life of some seriously intelligent drug smuggling and police avoidance. Number 2. Bar soaps. Believe it or not, this 91-year-old staunch churchgoer was charged in 2015 for smuggling cocaine into Australia from India. The elderly man, who received a lot of attention for his classy tweed outfits, is possibly the oldest person to ever be charged with drug trafficking. Allegedly, the man attempted to bring in 11 pounds of cocaine into Australia. The story gets even more interesting, however, as the 91-year-old, whose name is Victor Twartz, was apparently tricked into smuggling the drugs. After drug traffickers contacted him online, they scammed him into believing he was simply bringing soap into the country, as the cocaine was made to look like harmless bars of soap. After making a brief appearance at the courthouse, Mr. Twartz evoked the biblical book of Revelations, stating that whoever tricked him into smuggling the drugs should be cast into a lake of fire. Twartz also mentioned to reporters that he was absolutely against drugs and wasn't even a drinker of alcohol. While the police no doubt investigated foul play by the religious alleged drug smuggler, he was fortunate that they acknowledged the obvious possibility that he was tricked into committing the crime. According to Twartz, he was given the drugs just before his flight and asked to deliver them to someone in Australia. He thought the soap bars were gifts. Fortunately for him, prosecutors dropped all charges against him in 2016. Still, disguising drugs as soap bars and asking a 91-year-old to transport them is quite clever, if you can get away with it. Number 1. El Chapo. Born Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera, the drug kingpin notoriously known as El Chapo is probably the most infamous drug lord in history. With his friendly and unassuming appearance, El Chapo looks like he could be anyone's suburban next-door neighbor. But despite his looks, El Chapo was the top dog of the Sinaloa cartel, a massive gang that is the #1 importer of illegal drugs into the United States. Smuggling weed, meth, coke, and just about every other drug you can think of, the Sinaloa cartel was established in the 1980s and quickly became one of the world's most notorious drug cartels. After joining the cartel, El Chapo quickly rose to a leadership position. One of the most prominent moments of El Chapo's legacy came in 2006, when he assassinated someone from a rival cartel, openly violating a pact. This started the tragic Mexican drug war, which claimed over 60,000 lives and saw tens of thousands of kidnappings and other terrible crimes. Garnering a net worth in the billions, El Chapo was definitely living in luxury at the cost of countless lives. But this luxury wouldn't last. The Kingpin was imprisoned between 1993 and 2001, but he eventually escaped, spending around $2 million to bribe nearly 80 people. After being captured again in 2015, he escaped through a tunnel under the prison, arrested for the third time in 2016. He was extradited to the U.S., where he is now serving a life sentence at a maximum security prison, Colorado. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.